Hey up! Welcome or welcome back. Now, first of all, I feel I should point out that today's video should have been a glorious ride from Gale to Kettlewell via Fleet Moss, the highest road in Yorkshire. It's a truly spectacular route, and myself and Andy were gifted with a bright if chilly day on which to explore this glorious piece of landscape. Sad to say, and not for the first time, the GoPro decided it would be great fun to corrupt all the files and render the footage unusable. Yes, although the camera was giving every indication of operating correctly at the time, it was actually cloaking its mischievous activities, and through evil subterfuge and mendacity, right royally rogered me. So it is then that I am today compelled once more by good old GoPro to change tack and bring to you some recent footage from my beloved Dales whilst out on the Moto Guzzi V7. It's previously unpublished content for the most part, so I suppose that I am at least not being duplicitous in my endeavours. That said, it does offer up an opportunity for me to bring my perspective to a narrative which has of late taken on polemic qualities, or rather a series of polemics on various motorcycle brands and their current offerings to the market. Now, there is a contextual background to all of this, which is the widely recognised decline of the motorcycle market and the closure and/or brand dumping activities adopted by a number of dealerships here in the United Kingdom. From large franchises such as Completely Motorbikes going into administration recently, to the closure of big brand branches such as Harley Davidson, to the vanishing from the landscape of some independent operators and the streamlining of brand availability in others. All of these events I believe to be rooted in the general decline of living standards for people at the core of our economically active population. Now, I've made this point here for some time, as you're probably aware, and I continue to make it simply because it becomes more and more obvious with each passing day. Yesterday I dropped on a video from one of the bigger channels which sought to explore this reality in some detail. It started off as a very promising critique of the overall situation in the motorcycle marketplace, but about 2/3 of the way through it turned into a party political broadcast, so I switched off. No party politics here though, I can promise you. Just a cold, clinical look at some of the facts and a consideration of how things might develop going forward. Now, I have a suspicion, though I would put it no more strongly than that this backdrop of broad decline in the motorcycle sales industry is fueling some already misplaced prejudices held amongst a significant proportion of the motorcycling community. Prejudices regarding particular motorcycle brands which, for some bizarre reason, seem to invoke ire in people already disposed to character assassination when it comes to things they don't like. This can lead to some motorcycle brands falling premature victim to the over-amplified effects of internet and social media platform chatter. You know, there is an old expression, give a dog a bad name, which basically means that once something or someone is indicted in the homes and workplaces of the great internet court of injustice, an unstoppable hare is set running, and what started life as urban myth becomes an established and all too often parroted narrative, a corrosive narrative, a story in many cases of condemnation and vilification. In other words, a polemic. Such stories are invariably either entirely confected from day one or have laid their foundations on some accepted facts. Facts which, in the broad scheme of things, do not amount to much more than Rick's Hill of Beans. Casablanca. Great film. Now, it has to be said, I've come across this phenomena at close quarters on this channel. You may know I own 4 motorcycles which have featured and will continue to feature heavily on the channel. They are in fact at the core of the content I produce. But I have at times been taken aback by some of the negative comments which appear the minute I introduce a bike to the channel. My CF Moto 800 MT, Moto Guzzi V7, Royal Enfield Classic 350 and latterly BSA Gold Star 650 have all arrived at Fleet TBW in the last year as new bikes fresh from the dealership. Now, in that short time, I've learned some interesting facts. Facts in inverted commas, of course. And they go as follows. CF Moto 800 MT. Chinese rubbish. Won't last 2 minutes. Terrible build quality. No spares available. No dealerships. No servicing. Be worth nothing next year when China invades Taiwan and starts World War III. Moto Guzzi V7, typical unreliable Italian bike. Rubbish electrics which will fry at the first sign of rain. Ludicrous instrument display. Poor build quality. Poor paintwork. Bloody rust magnet. Royal Enfield Classic 350. Little Norman. Hopelessly underpowered. All the speedos are duff. The relays are rubbish. The forks corrode for fun. Terrible residuals. Worth sweet FA in part exchange. BSA Gold Star 650. Wow, what a feeding frenzy. Nobody wants them. Impossible to trade in. Worth nothing after a year. Terrible wiring issues. Water-cooled abomination. Dodgy tyres. Yes, on and on, such gleeful doom-mongering all rooted in a desire to see failure on another's part. All hail the keyboard warriors. Now, to be fair, I will point out that thankfully the vast majority of comments are always very positive and encouraging, which is in itself, well, encouraging. But the adverse reporting out there, even though it's largely exaggerated and frequently unsupported by facts, is sufficiently prevalent to drive levels of scepticism and mistrust that it starts to feed on itself and thereby grow into something grotesquely out of proportion, or put another way, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, all of this kind of exemplars the dark side of our age of all-informed everything. An age where the go-to platform for a motorcycle review is now YouTube and not the printed media. The professional journos of yesterday have been replaced by a plethora of DIY reviewers, many of whom are better than their professional predecessors, and by and large we are better informed as a result. But whereas before there was little space for polemics, there is now room aplenty. It's no coincidence that YouTube content creators are often referred to as influencers. This is a de facto state of affairs, and whether deliberately or consequentially, this content has the power to set narratives, to set that hair running, and to feed the loop. The bigger the channel, the greater the impact. Of course, I play my own small part in this, but you won't find any of my content where there is out and out criticism of any new motorcycle, because frankly, they're all pretty damn good in their own way. I've seen some content today from a big channel reporting on the difficulties being encountered in some quarters by people seeking to trade in their BSA Gold Stars. Presumably, the extent to which this is true is again being fueled by the disproportionately negative social media chatter, and when the story is woven into the fabric, it can't so easily be unpicked, can it? But what I can say for myself is this: I've trawled the depths of all the forums and groups for each of my bikes, Gold Star included, and I can find nothing that I wouldn't expect to find on a Triumph, BMW, Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Harley Davidson or other forum. Forums, groups and YouTube are where people give voice to their problems, and this tends to distort the picture. And those who point out that there are more issues in relation to some brands than to others may indeed have a point, but it's a point often out of context and rarely taking into account how recently to market some machines have come, and for that matter, what actually constitutes an issue. So I think I'll conclude by sticking my neck out once again and suggesting that this current trend, like all trends, will reverse over time. The decline, such as it is, whether brand specific or general, will bottom out at some point and optimism will surely return. In the meantime, those influencers out there should be very careful not to cross the boundary between objective, factual reporting and feeding the loop of doom and despondency. Now, at the time of recording this, not one of those woes predicted for any of my bikes has come to pass, and you'll be the first to know if it does. Meanwhile, any further such comments will result in this response from both myself and Eddie the German Shepherd. I'll see thee.